Welcome to SpanReads, not your typical rereads podcast, a 17-shard series where we reread the Cosmere and are giant nerds about it. Today, we will be talking about the use of magic in Warbreaker. I'm Ian, and joining me is Mish.
Hi, firstRainbowRose.
Jessie.
Hello, I'm Lady Lameness.
And Katie.
Oh, I'm AonEne.
And I'm Weiry. This episode will have spoilers for Warbreaker only. So, who wants to recap the magic in this book?
I mean, normally that's you.
I'm fine doing it. So, this is Nalthis, the world of color. And so the big thing is that people born on this world each are born with a biochromatic breath. Bit of magic that they can separate from themselves and can be transferred around between people. And this forms the basis of the magic system Awakening, which is a method to imbue life to inanimate objects so that they can do stuff like grab things and fetch keys. There's also the Returned, which are zombies. People coming back from the dead or I suppose they're more like vampires because they come back from the dead and then they survive by feeding off of breath. But they're super tall and super hot. So in some places they're worshipped as gods. There's also the Lifeless, which are totally zombies, which are dead bodies that have been awakened to do stuff. And they're handy because you can actually give them commands after they've been awakened. Usually it's just you can do one thing and you tell it what to do at the beginning. Lifeless, you can give them multiple commands over a period of time. Very handy. Very good as soldiers. And then there's Nightblood, who is a sentient object and is just terrifying.
See, previous episode. I love this magic system, and not just because it's the pretty magical colorful one, and I love rainbows. I love seeing the interactions around the world and just the very different ways that different people approach using Awakening.
And there are like some very interesting subtle things about Awakening that don't get discussed very often, because they are more relevant at the lower breath counts. Generally, like the closer something is to the shape of the awakener, the easier it is to awaken. It requires fewer breaths. That's sympathetic magic. Voodoo is like the human connection is just so interesting. Oh, the thing I didn't mention, biochromatic breath, as you accumulate, gives you special powers like perfect color recognition and perfect pitch and agelessness and immunity to disease. Those are very handy.
So, speaking of the Returned in particular, they are at the 5th heightening, and of course the reveal at the end of the book is that Vasher is Returned and has been around for a very long time. And there are some things that they can do, such as like changing how they look, which they don't really like. The Returned in the Court of the Gods, they don't really seem to understand that they have put up this persona themselves of how they look. But Vasher is able to change how he looks because he is more aware of this power. And there's just this great line at one point where Vivenna comments on the fact that his beard is always the same scruffy length, and he never seems to shave it, but it is always the same. And I thought that was like a really nice little subtle hint that Vasher is kind of doing this thing of this is how he sees himself, so that is how he presents. And like he isn't growing facial hair because he is not human anymore. He is a Returned. He's a vampire now.
Human, like he's not inhuman. He's just human plus. But yeah, like there are like a number of very interesting like foreshadowing moments of Vasher's returnedness. It's mentioned very early on and like never again that children and animals really like returned, which is kind of a thing that shows up a lot in like not pulp culture, but like folklore. That's a recurring trope. Children can like sense like the divine breath, sort of. They trust them. When they go and rescue Nanova's daughter, it's like Vivenna's trying to get the girl out of the cage, and like it's not working. And then Vasher's there and like reaches out his hand, and like she immediately goes to him. And then like when they get to Nanova's house, the guard dogs come running out. They immediately calm down when they get to Vasher's, like, and are just like little puppies, just like wanting attention from him. It's cool.
Also, the foreshadowing of he could have. There's a line where he goes, he could have the fifth heightening at any time if he wanted.
Yep.
And they don't touch on that.
Prologue.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. It's
It
just
is
like, oh,
page
I could
9.
if I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a sacrifice that I'm not willing to make.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was actually just about to bring that up as well.
Yeah. The prologue in this book is very good because like it does have that line. At that point, like you have no context for what that means. So it just kind of goes in one ear and out the other. Like who knows what that means? So you forget about it by the time like you learn about the returned. Mm-hmm. So you don't connect them. But also Vasher gives a breakdown of Awakening in that prologue. And then he gives the command fetch keys very nonchalantly, when that's the most difficult command that's given in the entire book. You just don't realize that just how complicated that is and how difficult of a command, because he is a master of Awakening. It's not difficult for him.
I don't know. Find tunnels might be slightly more complicated than get fetch keys.
No, because that's just finding. It's not returning with a thing.
That's fair.
There's also a comment in the prologue, and this is less about like Awakening, or it's kind of about Awakening. It's less about like Vasher being a returned, where he comments how he's tried to awaken metal multiple times. And it's just a interesting slip in there of kind of about his past and like what he was doing before Nightblood. Because I was talking to Eric about this the other day, and he must have been doing other experiments with Shashar before they got to Nightblood. Like they kind of gone from 0 to 100. And it just makes me wonder what happened in those experiments. And how did they go wrong? How did they go right? What did they learn from that? But for that to come up, I think it was like page 8 in the copy I was reading, was also very much on a reread. You notice all these little things that just don't matter the first time round are just so much fun to pick up on a reread.
Yeah. And it requires the 9th heightening to awaken stone or metal. Like that's not very common. So like there is the belief that it's impossible to awaken those things. They're so far removed from life. It's just an impossibility, but it's not. I also want to point out Vasher uses investiture as a term for the first time in the published Cosmere in this book. It's interesting going back to this book. Non-spoilers, we know a lot about the Cosmere now, but we didn't know a lot about things. Like this is where we got the term investiture from. And that is just so important for everything in the future, because he is a scholar. Like he gives that beautiful lecture on the 4 types of biochromatic entities. Why can't we get this for every magic system, please? Give us a scientific breakdown. Give us a lecture. Awesome. Which the 4 are the returned, which are sentient manifestations in a deceased host. There's the lifeless, which are non-sentient dead bodies. There's normal awakening, which is non-sentient awakened objects. And then type 4s, like Nightblood, which are sentient objects.
Which Vasher absolutely refuses to talk about at all.
Yeah, it's like, you said there were 4. That's not important.
It's a really interesting scene because of what we've seen of Vasher before that point. And we don't really know that much about Vasher, except the fact that he's kind of running around, like trying to stop the war. And then suddenly he dumps a scholar lecture on you. And it really comes out of nowhere. It's like, whoa, where did this come from? But that gives so much to his character. Of like, okay, there's a lot we don't know about you. And this is giving us like bits and pieces about that. The fact that you know so much about this magic, but also the way you present it when having to like tell someone else about it. It's really like teacher on a podium.
Yeah, he definitely has strong college professor that is not good with people vibes.
College professor who really shouldn't be a college professor.
Yeah.
I love how diverse and how, if you can think it, you can do it, this magic system is. And I say that originally just kind of as a throwaway line, but it's kind of true in that as long as you can picture it correctly and give that picture the right framework of words, if you can picture it, you can do it. And I love what's the word I'm looking for? The
versatility.
Yes.
There's definitely a lot, without going into spoilers, that we can look back on this book in terms of things like intent and commands. And that is really all we can say on it.
Yeah, it's like this book forms the bedrock for a lot of things that we will get into next episode. And this book also hints at a lot of, Vasher says again and again, it's like, there's still so much more we don't know about awakening. Case in point, like memory manipulation. I read the line of like, I can like remove the memories from you, Dent. I can return you to the man you once were. And he also, with Nanerva's daughter, like removes the memories of her imprisonment so that she's not traumatized for life. How does that fit into the framework of awakening that we understand? Because it really doesn't. Like that, what does that have to do with awakening objects? But yeah, it is still part of the magic system. We just don't know. We want, like, Brandon, I'm imploring you, please write Nightblood at some point.
Please. It's interesting. I keep on thinking about how much of this magic system really works with the spiritual realm and reflects the spiritual realm within the physical realm. Because, Vasher picturing himself is probably a little bit closer. It makes me think about other characters in the Cosmere and how the spiritual realm impacts their physical appearance. And, talking about how removing a piece of their memory would probably be manipulating their spiritual web. And
it's complicated because like a lot of those things I would ascribe more to the cognitive realm, because like it's your own self.
That's fair.
Your own self-perception is cognitive, but there is that spiritual ideal. So it's like Return definitely taps into that for like broader like cultural perceptions of beauty moderated by their own self-perception.
Yes, I was mixing up my realms. I was meaning cognitive, but yeah. It's interesting how much the cognitive realm, unlike other magic systems, the cognitive realm really plays a big role in this magic system.
Yeah.
It also plays a role in how characters often describe items as wanting to be awakened and wanting to be alive again.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Oh yeah, breath auras. Breath auras are a thing. If you have a bunch of breath, you make the colors around you brighter. And then Nightblood has basically a reverse breath aura, which makes colors around him deeper, which is color theory thing that I don't totally understand entirely, but it's cool.
I also wanted to bring up not just the lifeless, but the statues, the Khaled's phantoms, because they're lifeless, but I've always kind of thought of them more as awakened objects because they're not bodies. And I think it's an interesting way of doing it where it seems to be just human remains are what is needed more than a body to make a lifeless. But because these are bones and they're kind of just objects once they're bones and like not in a skeleton or anything. Like I've always thought of those kind of objects, and like there's another book that kind of treats the things like this where when it's living, but once it's dead, it's like, well, this is just an object now. It's only really clicked for me this read through that they were lifeless and not awakened objects.
Yeah, they're very, like Vasher says, like it was cheating, and it's like it's a very interesting edge case, really, because the concerning thing about lifeless is that they're more aware than people think they are, and like it's a very bad thing that the Hollindren like keep all of the lifeless in the dark. That's not good. That's not a good thing. Brennan has mentioned like wanting to do a lifeless POV in Nightblood.
Interesting.
So it's like, if it can have a POV, how much of that is spiritual cognitive mumbo jumbo and how much of that is like the actual physical brain? It's like, how aware are the Dirdanir statues? It's like they're just bones in statues. Like that, I don't know what effect that would have on a mind.
Because they don't really have a mind. If they're bones, they don't have a brain. So,
but like if it is like mostly cognitive and spiritual, like the brain might not be required to have a mind, and it's just like, this is interesting. There's repercussions here.
It's like if there's still some sort of spiritual attachment of that person to these bones, then it might be going off that more than the physical. But it's just kind of weird to think about where the physical is just a bunch of bones that have been arranged in the right formation so that they look like a skeleton.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily like the mind of the person that body was. It would be very interesting, like if you mix and match bones, like how much what would that do?
Oh yeah, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, that's terrifying. A little. Of course, we just did Mistborn, so it makes me think about Mistborn.
Yeah.
Makes me think of the Unwind series, honestly. I don't know if any of you have read that.
I've not read it, but I am familiar with it. Because that's the one where it's like up until like age 18, your parents can just like, nah, we don't want them. You can like use them for parts.
Yeah.
Oh, that one. That's the Neil Schusterman?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of... because this is only one book, there's still so much to dig into. Because like, yes, this forms the basis for a lot of things in the Cosmere, but it's concepts that are being used elsewhere. It's not awakening being used elsewhere, really. Let's dig more into this. Come on, Brandon. I have not wanted Nightblood more than during this reread. It's like, it's the downside of rereading this book.
Yeah.
Now you want the sequel.
Yeah.
One thing we really didn't touch on with the Returned is that they do have prophetic dreams. Like there definitely is something going on there. Again, we don't really know much.
Like prophetic dreams. They also have the ability to see prophetic. I think it's Allmother says that she saw Lightsong coming to her in one of her pictures.
Yeah, and like we see on screen, Lightsong seeing Shashara in Nightblood in the painting. There are real things that the iridescent tones as a religion, like there is some truth there, like, which is interesting.
Feels like they are more connected to the spiritual realm in some way to be able to get these like prophetic dreams and the paintings and things like that. Because being able to see in both directions as well, like
reading connection, like using fortune, all that fun stuff. Spiritual mumbo jumbo.
How does fortune come into it?
I mean, foretelling the future.
Oh no, I more mean like I want to know more in world.
Oh,
like,
okay.
More than like asking how. Like I agree. I want to know more in world now.
I'm just like, isn't it obvious? Like what?
that one was pretty obvious, yes.
So we're very rapidly getting to the point where we want to talk about full Cosmere stuff. So we're going to cut this here, and you can check out our episode next week where we can go into a lot more depth about a lot more things. Thank you for watching. You can find us at 17shard.com for all the news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud. You can leave us a review on iTunes, and you can subscribe on YouTube, and you can support us on Patreon. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.